So, carrying on from the last video, I was talking about how the 3 of 2 of 3 of 2 of 3 of 2 structure of existence is symmetrically asymmetrical with a 2 of 3 of 2 of 3 of 2 of 3 coordinate system, where the negative and the positive are the 2 part, and then the 3 perpendicular orientations. And I said that is part of a larger symmetrically asymmetrical structure, and that the fact that it was symmetrical has to do with evading explanation, or evading the need for explanation, because we'll come to this idea that I'm going to talk about a lot, that there's no asymmetry for free. The human mind doesn't like asymmetry or unexplained asymmetry. So if you plant a garden and the plants only grow in some places and not others, we're compelled to ask why. Why now and not before, or why here and not there? There's always this asymmetry, and we look for a reason to explain the asymmetry, which is also an asymmetry. So you see, there's eventually going to be an infinite regress problem. It's going to have to be sidestepped, and that's usually that's how symmetry can be used. But not to get sidetracked, this larger yin and yang is part of what I call a pre-existential Big Bang that starts with 0, and it goes 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it goes all the way to the 9th set. So basically I'm saying, if you grant me non-existence, which is 0, I can derive everything, as long as it's also granted that you can use retroactive explanation. What I mean by that is, you start with 0, meaning non-existence rather than existence, and then you're provoked into asking, well, why non-existence rather than existence? Why not existence rather than non-existence? And you see the asymmetry problem right there. And so how you get rid of that is you include existence and non-existence. They're both true and they're both false. Existence is true as non-existence is false, and vice versa, and it's part of an eternally non-eternal loop. And so that's how you get from 0 to the 0, 1, because you have to symmetrize. But the fact that you have to symmetrize it is because you're trying to evade undecidability. And the concept of evading undecidability is actually a concept that's part of set 9. So this concept or idea in set 9, which is like the end of this pre-existential Big Bang, has to retroactively initiate the entire process. And this is possible because this what I'm talking about is not part of existence. It's the derivation of all the aspects of existence, and when existence applies and when it doesn't apply, and why it applies as opposed to not apply, and vice versa. So you start out with non-existence, and then you realize that you have to include existence. So you have 0, 1, and then 0, 1, 2 is plus, minus, and 0. And then the 0, 1, 2, 3, that's a 3-dimensional coordinate system where 0 is in the center. 0 is basically what you start with. So in the beginning I said, if you grant me non-existence is 0, I can exploit this evasion of undecidability retroactively. And so you get you're basically deriving the fact why existence is three-dimensional in the first place, that there's a crude three-dimensionality to it. Without all the scales, you can just look at the top of existence, which is just this like network of filaments connected to these higher density nodes, which they call superclusters of galaxies. And then the filaments, the lower density areas, which are thinner and less dense, along with the superclusters of galaxies, they form sort of the outlines of these supervoids, which are virtually no density. They're not entirely, obviously there's gas, a little bit of gas and a few galaxies in there, but my point is that that's why it's three-dimensional. It's because you're going from 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then it gets kind of complicated, where the fourth set, the fifth set, the sixth set, seventh set, and eighth set deal with more complicated categories, and same with the ninth set, except for that one I was talking about. And so you can derive everything this way, all the categories of everything. But the thing is that you have this closure of everything, but it turns out that there's 4 different stories of everything. Meaning, what really happens is when 0 goes to 0 and 1, it's deciding without deciding between possibilities. It's saying that's the plan, or the Tao. That's what explains why it goes from 0 to 0 and 1. But then evading undecidability actually explains why it decides without deciding between possibilities. So it's like evading undecidability is the goal, and the plan that's explained by the goal is to decide without deciding between possibilities. Except the plan comes first, and then it's retroactively explained. And in this process, it actually creates the opposite of that too, where you have non-decision coming before decision as well, and that's a complication. So the 4 stories of everything kind of go like this. They're basically the self-explaining plan of everything, and that's what I was just talking about, where it's the plan that's in the forefront. The Tao, I call it the Tao, to decide without deciding between possibilities. Then it's retroactively explained. Now the other way of looking at it is that the evasion of undecidability is primary, where you have the self-including source of everything, where evading undecidability is the source. And then you have what works for everything, what works for making everything. And that's the panentheistic one. Now the other one, the self-including source of everything, that's the pantheistic one. And then there's an atheistic one, which is the self-designing set of everything. And then there's the self-explaining plan of everything. And so it starts out monotheistically, where the self-explaining plan of everything is still monotheistic. But then the creation of the 3 other stories are a consequence of to decide without deciding between possibilities operating on the whole thing. So it's like in making itself not God by allowing 3 other stories for everything, by embracing undecidability. Or basically what I'm saying is it embraces undecidability, and that's what it's doing is deciding without deciding between evading undecidability and embracing undecidability. So it becomes, in losing its monotheistic quality, it remains monotheistically dominant. By allowing polytheism, it enables it to be monotheistic. It's like it's like a paradox, but it's not a contradiction. You can see how that works together. So this worldview, I call it Wiccan Taoism hypertheism, because it's not leaving out any of the different kinds of ideas. It's using them all, and they're all true and false, as the other ones are false and true. I like to use the idea of Wittgenstein's duck rabbit, where the duck perspective is true and false, as the rabbit perspective is false and true. And that's what I really mean by to decide without deciding between possibilities. You're deciding duck perspective here and now, and then, but not later. You see what I mean? It's allowing for the other perspective. It's deciding without deciding between the possibilities themselves. It's not leaving out the rabbit perspective or the duck perspective. So that's interesting. The other thing is the Wittgenstein part. All the ideas of Wittgenstein are sort of like explaining how all this is happening in a context that's not part of existence. He didn't say exactly that, but all of his work kind of hints at, like, philosophy not being part of what we're trying to explain. And that possibilities were given. So when I say atheism, I mean Wiccan atheism. When I say panentheism, I mean Wiccan panentheism. When I say pantheism, it's Wiccan pantheism. There's even a version of nihilism, where you might say, well, it can retroactively explain the initiation of the pre-existential Big Bang, but that doesn't mean it has to. Why not do it? And the answer is that that's true also. You see what I mean? It just doesn't go anywhere. You see, like, you can include it. Yeah, it's included. It just doesn't mean, it doesn't do anything. So that means that nihilism is also true. I think this is much more interesting. That what this is a puzzle of ideas, not. It's even using ideas that I'm saying are not true, like the Big Bang or the multiverse, and then it's using them in a different context so that the idea is sound. Or even how theorists use this symmetry idea to get out of needing explanation. The idea is sound. It's just the expression of it is not. And all ideas have a false expression and a true expression. They're like a double-edged sword. And their first expression seems to be the false expression. It's like the idea is introduced, but it's applied incorrectly. That's a theme that reoccurs. You'll see throughout these videos. Even the idea of relativity gets used in a different way. Mainly, there's 4 stories of everything. And that's a version of relativism. It's not the relativism that Einstein was talking about, but you could take the idea and use it in a different kind of context. So that's why it's called Wiccan Taoism hypertheism. Because the Vikendaism part is the monotheistic part, and the hypertheism part is that all the theisms are true and false. They're puzzle pieces. Now the puzzles can't fit in any particular way, but they're all used in one way and not any other way. That makes them all true and false. This is similar to how Derrida used to talk about his term deconstruction, where he talked about like a vigilante. A vigilante is a villain and a hero. But he was talking in terms of like social categories, whereas I'm talking about categories of nature itself. The categories of nature are defined in terms of one another, and the categories of the social map that we build with language is, even though it's also part of nature, that's the categories are defined in themselves and out of the intention of the user. And even when we recognize a chair, we're recognizing the intent to sit implicitly, and we have a feeling of familiarity. These things only really occur to the average person, like the normal person. Like if you saw someone went to the forest and you saw something as like an improvised chair, and you go, I bet someone, that's not a natural occurrence, that I see an intent there. I don't see an intent, but like I already understand. Even when philosophers deny certain things like free will or the fact that there's reasons for their actions, or intent, they betray their own, they don't look at their own behavior. Like someone will take a inconvenient route somewhere, and your buddy will be with you and he'll go, why'd you take the less convenient route? And he'll say like, well, I wanted to stop by here, or I wanted to roll by this girl. You know, there's always a reason, but we act like there's not sometimes. So basically there's no inconvenience for free. That's another kind of way of saying there's no asymmetry for free. You never expect someone to inconvenience themselves without a reason that outweighs that inconvenience. So when we're judging people, even for having different priorities, when we say lazy and things like that, those things are part of the social map. They're not actually part of nature, because in nature there's no free will, where free will is really the limits of our social map. They're like the limits of our socially accepted reasons that we've been told or realized through experience. It's not necessarily the complete reasons, because we're usually confused. We're confused and angry when we don't see what those reasons could possibly be. Sometimes we're proven wrong with our quick reactions, especially in traffic. So no one's immune to that, really. I don't know how much more I want to talk about right now. Yeah, I'll stop there.